For today, I'm going to introduce my journey. I'm going to show you how I started with a case study methodology of action research. There was a pivot a little way in the middle where I had to revise my methodology, which I'm going to explain, and I'm going to show you the findings, and that's the structure for today. The students at my university have been undertaking a lot of work with the Sustainable Development Goals since 2016. We are in the advertising, PR and branding program, so a lot of the work that we do is related to content creation to support and advocate for good causes such as no poverty or zero hunger or quality education, as in the case of this particular video. The students have been inspired by the SDGs over the course of this period and have created some wonderful experiences for themselves, for other people, and for me. I found it very rewarding. I started in academia only a few years ago after 20 years in industry, and whilst I was in industry, I was used to continuous appraisals or continuous bonuses and all kinds of things like this, hitting top scores. Coming into academia, I tried to apply the same kind of logic to my work here, and I saw there's all these different signposts around whether I want to become a fellow of the Higher Education Academy, or senior fellow, or national fellow, whether I want to become a lecturer, a senior lecturer and beyond, or whether I just want to maintain my job. And I saw there was lots of different ways of presenting the work that we're doing for those various qualifications. I felt like I was in a pinball machine, bouncing from side to side to side. And one of the aspects that I discovered was that if I was able to present my teaching and the effects of my teaching, then that would result in my positive career. So this is partially it's a bit of a selfish benefit for this activity, but of presenting my case, and this is where I started off on. So I came on with an action case methodology to test my teaching, to make sure that what I was doing was actually having an impact on the students. I used a multiple case replication. I've been using the Sustainable Development Goals in my teaching since 2005 in multiple courses. So I was going to show how the SDGs supported my students in multiple different programs, from advertising program to a journalism program to a first year to a third year program, and show how the similarities in the outcomes were, and some of the differences that were there as well, and how that could be applied to a much broader scale. I had used an embedded design, so each of my programs that I have, and I'll demonstrate them in a moment, would be evaluated on 3 different factors, one being the reach or the geography of the exposure that my students would gain as a result of participating with the Sustainable Development Goals, the value that they would gain from employability or life-changing experiences, and the longer-term impact that those students would feel from actually being involved with global citizenship and being involved with matters that are of deep concern to society. These 3 factors are related to the National Teaching Fellowship criteria from the Higher Education Academy, which is the important body from the United Kingdom. And I had the idea I've got so much content. I had video content, video reflections from the students to evaluate. I could reach out to alumni and do some interviews. I looked at some archive data, which I have. I have all of this material and I was all ready to go. And then I had to do an emergency stop and a pivot. And the reason being that despite the data that I had available, which was huge, it's infographics such as this one, I had clear global reach going from across the Middle East. With this, if you click on this at home, this is an NBC video. We have people from the United Nations coming to visit us. We have the Ministry of Climate Change coming to visit us. We had exposure across the country and across the world with huge reach. We had enormous impact with the students getting employment opportunities and the unique opportunities to interview people. This is ASRAC. And to practice their skills, despite the fact that the students saw great value where they were doing stuff above and beyond what they were doing in campus. In this particular instance, they were representing Dubai Cares at the Global Goals World Cup. Despite all of this, and the fact that I had invented tools which are available. I've put in the second link you can all access. I demonstrated these tools multiple times. I'm producing social media tools. I published a book, which you can all access. I put a little link in the chat box for you to all access. And as a result of COVID, converted everything to an online platform, which the students all work. Despite having done all of this and being ready to evaluate it from a case study methodology, I realized that as soon as I was stopping the course, all of this great practice, all these great ideas were vanishing into the ether. They were vanished. They were no longer existing. There was no point in me measuring my high score based on reach, outcome, and what have you, because every time I fired my balls up into the pinball, they would always land between the flippers and die. And so my research pivoted, instead of trying to see how high my score should be, to actually try and work out how to anchor the initiative so that they didn't vanish as soon as I finished the end of term or I changed the course. So I looked for some inspiration, and I went into the literature and I started to explore how other sustainable development programs were being taught around the world. I went back in time. In the 1970s, it started with environmental education, through the Brundtland Report in the 1980s, when it became more triple bottom line related, people, planet, and profit, to the 1990s and the early 2000s, where it started, where the whole education sustainable development started to become related to peace, global citizenship, and to the more recent times where the sustainable development goals have been embedded within Agenda 2030, within the Paris Climate Agreement, and with in the recent UN Transformation Education Summit, which just concluded in the UN General Assembly. I was really inspired by all of this, and I assumed that it was being really heavily involved in colleges around the world. But then I discovered other signs that perhaps it wasn't being happening. There's a study from Philo et al. Just published in 2021 where they only discovered that out of 140 universities and colleges with a high reputation for sustainability, their particular results showed that only 12 saw that teaching SDGs was high or very important. Okay, the academic takes time to be published, but I also looked at the Times Higher Education report, which only came out in 2019, where it incorporated SDGs in its rankings, impact rankings, and today there's only about 1,400 universities and higher education institutes are reporting on the SDGs, in comparison to 1,600 which report overall. So I said, okay, fine, there's something not quite right, because again, I came from outside of academia and I see education as being a social good, where we have the global north working with the global south in a social contract to share knowledge to help move people out of poverty. I looked at some of the other literature related to the globalization of education to see what the problem might be there. And there is the standardization argument, where the internationalization of education doesn't necessarily achieve the social contract it was intended to do, and where some international colleges are actually supporting only the wealthiest students because they are for-profit businesses and they're looking more at STEM versus a broader critical curriculum. So then I came and transformed my question. I thought, okay, there are these practices which are benefiting and are being sustained, and these are being used in this private sector type of methodology. Maybe they're for STEM. These initiatives are being helped to promote these other more vocational educational practices. And I thought, if these are being anchored, can we apply those to sustainable development transformations? And as a result, and the importance of that being that we just had the Transforming Education Summit, which has just been concluded, where it's been where the UN has encouraged educators in local countries to come up with their own local initiatives. And I said, if those initiatives cannot be anchored, then they're going to go the same way as my own initiatives in some respects, where as soon as the energy is lost, they're no longer going to be useful. So I took the existing case study, that methodology that I had, and revised it to, instead of looking at my own practice, to actually talk to people who have also done transformational initiatives but have had their initiatives protected by the campus. I looked at 20 transformative cases within an international brands canvas, and I conducted some manifest content analysis and a projected content analysis as well. The manifest content is based on a study from Riccardi et al., which looked at organizational learning for the common good. And they have certain anchors. These are certain anchoring strategies which protect transformational education. It's the creation of a center of excellence, the creation of a committee, rewriting strategy documents and policies, providing marketing support, having innovation awards. In my study, the emerging results, or the initial results, show that centers of excellence and strategy documents were two of the most common forms of anchoring strategies that were undertaken. Then there's kinds of transformational initiative. What is that? What do we mean by transformational initiative? And the literature describes transformational as either being something which has a pedagogical improvement, local relevant content, addresses a societal problem or challenge, involves interdisciplinary work, teaching and learning content. And the three major issues here were relevant local content, addressing external issues, and also improving teaching and learning content. The other three factors were also quite prevalent, but those three in pink were the most relevant. Now, the next thing we also looked at were indicators of whether it was going to be a resource-based organization, whether the organization was looking for private benefit for capitalism, if you like, how were they going to make profit, are any of these initiatives meant for improving its competitive advantage, neo-institutionalist, whether any of these initiatives are meant for meeting the minimum requirements of the operating licenses, whether there's an important stakeholder group, activism or what have you, or whether there's this emerging model which is for the common good, where the initiative was put in place purely for the case of enriching the local society, being part of the social contract. And now my emergent themes from the projective content analysis was quite interesting. The ways that initiatives were being transformed were through one of two models. One, there'd be a knight, a single individual, which was championing an initiative, or there was a two-person team, where there'd be an older, younger person, someone who's more senior, someone more junior, working together. Is either the knight or a master and apprentice model. The second finding that I discovered were that the majority of the cases, they had an external trigger. Someone from outside the campus was saying, you should be doing this, this is what we need. And this would be taken on board by either the master apprentice team or by the knight and implemented within the local campus. The third factor was if it wasn't from an external source, the practitioner themselves might lean on theory. If they'd been teaching management theory, they might implement it themselves. They say, look, okay, we'll eat our own poison. Or if it came from someone like myself who came from outside of academia, I would have seen there was a gap in the teaching from my practice, and I would try to implement it based on my personal experience and knowledge. There's also a sense of autonomy involved. Was there enough freedom? Did the people feel that did the master apprentice feel like they had the strength and the support of the management to actually make decisions, or did they have to continuously seek bureaucratic chains of approval, where there was a sense of freedom, or where they felt like they could move forward without needing so much permission, or where they thought they had support? There was a significant amount of transformation identified. And then finally, there was how I asked people how they reported. And again, coming from an external point of view, I'd expect people to be sharing figures on the success of a number of attendees, quality feedback, constructive feedback from people who participated. But one of the strongest factors that I discovered in the research is that the people who were reporting their success in conferences, seminars, journals, or awards we're seeing that their activities were receiving stronger support within their institution. Which then leaves me with a conclusion for how to integrate my sustainable development practices and teaching more effectively within my own campus would be to identify your knights or the master apprentice couples, create opportunities for engaging with external partners, focus on develop a center of excellence under which to support and house these ideas, then write or rewrite steering documents such as corporate strategies, policies, curricula and programs to incorporate the knowledge that is generated out of this process. Support academic quality reporting, so it's not just a case of reporting to the regulators, local regulators, but to encourage participation in HCT quality education event that we're doing, general education event that we're doing today, and other forms of conferences. And then finally, to sort of scale it with the marketing support.